So it's 2025 and you've decided this is the year for some sort of shade in your backyard. Maybe your trees suck. Maybe you finally told your husband to get off the couch and decide to do it. Or maybe you are that husband who is now going to actually do it. Today we're going to talk through what your options are, how you can get your backyard shaded for what you're looking for, if that's going to be for wind, snow, whatever it is. We're going to go through the whole litany of different things you can and cannot do and what is and isn't a good idea. So stick with us and hopefully we'll help you in the end. So first things first, shade sales. So a shade sale is basically going to be really inexpensive. Those are the huge benefits around it. It is modern looking, which a lot of people like. You see them on beaches, you see them in a lot of different places. So the pros are going to be that it's obviously that modern look. You're going to get the same UV protection from any sort of fabric over your head. So that's obviously a huge benefit depending on what you need when it comes to some sort of UV protection. And the last one's going to be that it's customizable in different shapes and sizes. Typically they're triangles, but they don't have to be triangles. And depending on what size you need to cover, you can typically find the shade sale that best fits what you're looking for. So the cons are gonna be the fact that installation can be a little tricky. You gotta erect the poles, figure out how you're gonna brace them. Sometimes those are gonna lift out of the ground if you just try and bury them in the ground. If you're attaching to a different structure, now you have to know what your withdrawal load is on that screw. The other downside is just gonna be the fact that it isn't great in high wind loads or with water. So if rain gets on it, it's gonna pool, it's gonna get super heavy, or it's gonna leak through. And when it comes to high wind loads, like in storms, you pretty much have to take it down. I know someone that I've talked to before, and he actually tried to get it out in the middle of a storm and it snapped, and he had things whipping around in the storm. The last point there's going to be, it doesn't last very long. Typically these are going to be made with less expensive fabric types, and so they're going to fade, and they're going to typically be stitched with polyester, which is not UV resistant, so it actually sun rots. It basically degrades in sunlight. They're not meant for long-term use, so you just need to know that if you're going to get into shade sales. So does get you the shade you're looking for, not great when it comes to durability in any sort of inclement weather. For shade sales, the price can really vary. A lot of it has to do with the quality of the fabric and the square footage you're covering. They can be anywhere from $20 to $2,000. The second one here is going to be the umbrella. This is the traditional patio cover. You're probably used to using them, at least in terms of opening and closing them. So you kind of know what you're looking at when you're looking at an umbrella. It's typically also localized around a table, unless you get the larger ones, which can pivot. So the big pros around umbrellas is usually the fact that they're relatively inexpensive and they're portable. You can put them basically anywhere you want, and the really expensive ones you can actually pivot in order to handle the sun as it starts to set. On the con side is that your shade is really localized, right? It's only gonna be wherever the umbrella is or where it isn't. I'm gonna have to keep adjusting it, especially as the sun sets. And the other major con is the fact that usually people buy an umbrella as like a stopgap, because it doesn't really solve the problem that they originally had. It's great aesthetically, but it usually doesn't give them that feeling of, I don't need something else. And that sort of nagging feeling you have in the back of your head is usually what gets people to talk to us about getting something else. It's not good in wind, it's not good in rain. You have to have that big heavy base. So they're relatively unstable and they're not good for long-term use. They could be anywhere from $20 to $2,000, again, depending on square footage and quality of what you're buying. Your third category here is going to be awnings. Usually these are going to be motorized. They do also sell manual versions of these. I'm very familiar with awnings because I've installed probably 200 to 300 awnings at least in my life. The thing with awnings is it's all about quality over everything else. So the big pros around an awning is gonna be the fact that you get basically whatever size you want, adjustable, as wide as you want. Projection, you're relatively limited, usually around 14 feet or less. You're also gonna be able to get all the shade you want, that UV protection you're looking for. You're gonna have no posts on the front end, so you get that sort of suspended shade feel. So it does give you all of those things, and usually with a fabric that matches or complements your house. The cons on an awning is usually the fact that it's gonna require some sort of professional installation. Again, I would know. There are some scenarios where you can get away with doing it yourself if you've got a standard house wall. So there's definitely some caveats. I would highly recommend you just have someone else install it for you. It's usually not that expensive to have someone else do it. The other thing that's gonna be a downside is the fact that it's just a higher upfront initial cost. The third con is the fact that it's not that good in inclement weather. If you're looking for a space where you can sit out there in the rain at any point in time, an awning is not the best fit for you. Yes, they have slope to them. Yes, the fabric originally has a waterproof coating on the more expensive ones that will allow the water to scoot off. But if you imagine it like a convertible top, that waterproof coating will come off over time. And you're gonna run the risk of it just building up moisture. And that typically is when you start having that mildew issue, usually at about the 10 depending on how much water you're around, somewhere between 8 to 10 to 12 years is when you're gonna start seeing that issue and you're gonna have to replace the fabric. Part of that inclement weather downside is gonna be the fact that in wind loads, basically anything over 25-mile-an-hour winds, you're not gonna want it out. It's gonna scare you. Your awning, depending on how strong it is, may not actually have a problem with being able to withstand the wind, but your two big issues are gonna be withdrawal resistance and how it's installed in the studs, whether or not you crack your siding if it's fiber cement, and the fact that at a certain point, the arms of the awning simply can't take it. But usually before you even get to those points, it's just terrifying to sit under it in a 25-mile-an-hour gust because the thing is flapping like crazy. If you live in most of these new subdivisions like I do, which was an old cornfield, like I'm not getting an awning because I'll never get to use it. It's too windy. The last big con, I guess if I'm trying to shoehorn it in here real quick, is the fact that birds love to nest next to these things. They love it. Pricing for awning can be anywhere between $100 to, actually more like $8,000 or $9,000, which usually scares people and surprises them. Do not buy the $100 ones. They break almost immediately. We had a customer that bought one that was about $300 on some website, I can't even remember. It broke 2 days after they installed it. And then they bought ours for like $4,000 or $5,000 back when we used to sell those and install them. So like they were out more money than if they just agreed to work with us in the first place. So buy something that's more able to withstand wind load and with better fabric from a good vendor that comes with professional installation. Those are definitely things you should do. So your next category here is gonna be wood and vinyl pergolas. And these are your aesthetic treats for the eye. Like this is why you buy something like this. So cedar wood pergolas and a white vinyl pergola are the two that you traditionally see. And these are very inspired by the Roman architecture of the standard pergola with those corbel ends and the rafters and the lattice work and sometimes the vines that go up the sides. With this pergola, you're gonna be looking at the big pros are gonna be aesthetics. More than anything, it's just the look that you want. And if it's the look that you want, then you gotta have it. With cedar, you're gonna get that rich, red or rustic feel. And with the white, you're gonna get that pristine sort of appearance, especially at the very beginning. You are also gonna get some shade as well underneath. Again, it's gonna depend on where you're at. You are gonna have that effect where you're I've read underneath a pergola before and you notice that there's shade in some spots and it's too bright in other spots to read it. So I've moved the book to actually meet the shade spot as I'm at certain lines. And it can also hang plants, which is a traditional thing that people will do, or walls can be typically supported like slat walls if you want some of that sort of enclosure aspect. So those are the big pros around a wood or vinyl pergola. The cons on a wood or vinyl pergola are somewhat extensive. With a wood pergola, you're gonna have to treat it. You do need to make sure you stain it almost every year, sometimes more than that, depending on how much sunlight you're in. With the vinyl pergolas, it's gonna be more about the fact that they will rot. Vinyl in and of itself actually doesn't have enough structural capacity to be built out of pure plastic. Vinyl's plastic. So you have to load it with wood or slide wood inside the hollow plastic shapes. And that wood is usually a treated wood, so it should age relatively well, but water and humidity will still get trapped in there. And you will eventually, especially if you don't use treated, but you will still eventually have that wood degrade over time. Also, vinyl will warp. So over time, you'll notice that the vinyl will expand and contract in two directions, both this way and this way. And so you get this oil can effect where it's expanded too much and the screws have held it in place. And so you get kind of a bunching after, especially 8 years, you're looking at actually having to take it down and put up something else because the wood at the bottom of the posts has actually rotted off in both circumstances. The other negatives are the obvious. It does allow some sunlight in, so you're not gonna get perfect total shade underneath if that's what you're looking for. You'll have those hot spots in certain spaces. The other issue is the fact that rain will still get through. I can't tell you how many times people have asked me, can I put some sort of cover over my pergola? If you're gonna buy a pergola, know you're going into it without a cover. Pricing for a wood or vinyl pergola is gonna really vary, anywhere between $600 to $15,000. On the $600 end, you're really gonna just get the vinyl pergola without any of the wood or the installation. On the $15,000, you're gonna get a relatively large, usually full rough cedar pergola. So with installation usually as well. So it just depends within there what you're willing to pay for and what you're willing to sacrifice. The next option here is gazebos. And this is where you're looking for some sort of freestanding, independent shade and rain cover that also can hold snow and normal things out. A gazebo is great for all of those things. If you want that sort of cover away from everything else, those metal roofs that are kind of pitched, that are freestanding, are kind of in the same category that I will label gazebos. So the pros on this is it's going to be able to give you that overhead coverage that you're looking for from rain, from snow, from sun, from everything. It's obviously a permanent structure, so you do have the option to eventually add screens or some other accessory around the outside sides so that you can get a little extra use out of it if you do want to screen it in. And the last one is just going to be the fact that it adds value generally to the property, right? It's a nice centerpiece for the yard. It's a focal point. It's a place for people to go and to enjoy dinner or whatever it is. A gazebo, I think, does all of those things actually quite well. The cons on a gazebo are just the fact that it's going to be relatively expensive just because it's a permanent structure. Again, depending on who you have build it. If you have your buddy Tom build it, everyone has a buddy Tom, then that's going to be a lot less expensive than the alternative. It is going to be a permanent structure, so you're not going to be able to pick it up, move it somewhere else. You need to decide once and for all where it's going to be located. But if you're looking for overhead coverage, freestanding away from the house, and you don't care about it opening and closing, for example, or any sort of adjustability, you just know you want a permanent cover somewhere, this is a really great option for most people. Gazebo pricing is gonna, again, we've got a variety here. It's gonna go between $500 to $40,000. For the $500, you're gonna get something that is gonna be serviceable. That's the best way to describe it. It's still gonna let a lot of heat through. It's gonna be made out of usually straight, mild steel, so it's going to rust, it's gonna leak orange everywhere. So as you move up the price tier, you're eventually gonna get into buying a wood version of it, where they're gonna have those nice pillars and a roof. Either that's a metal roof or it's gonna end up having shingles on it. The only recommendation I would have is to get it insulated if you can, so that you don't run the risk of, especially those metal roofs that are just black, radiate heat down. And it feels like you're in an attic sometimes on those hot days. So definitely get it insulated so none of that heat radiates down and you have a nice experience underneath it. As we're moving up the price tier here, your next option is gonna be a covered porch. Covered porch is usually attached to the home and extends out from the home. This is going to be usually really integrated, which is the big benefit. Most people picture a gabled version of this, but they also have a different style, which is called a shed style roof or a single slope style roof. Both of these give you the same benefit, which is a covered area that extends naturally from your home. Usually the shingles or whatever roof covering matches your home as well. The painting, everything else kind of looks as though it was there when it was originally built. So the big pros around a covered porch is the fact that it does add value to your home, and it's very obvious that it adds value to your home because it looks like your home is just bigger. It has more square footage. It gives you that same shade and water coverage attached to the house, so it's a natural extension from the home into some sort of covered outdoor space. You also can get this screened in over time. If you don't do it immediately, you typically can later if you plan for it. And it can also be used year-round in a lot of climates. Indiana may not be one of those, but there are a lot of places where you can enjoy a covered porch for most of the year. The cons on a covered porch are going to be pretty obvious. One of those is going to be the fact that it immediately darkens whatever room is adjacent to it. If you had a door that led out to the outside, you put a roof over it, you just limited the amount of sunlight that's now going to come through that door because now it has to pass through that room. And don't be deceived if you put those gable end windows, it still is going to cut down on the light. It's also going to obviously be permanent. Once you put it in, there's no going back. You can't then take it back off. I mean, I guess you could, but it'd be very, very expensive. And the last caveat there is going to be the expense involved. Most people don't expect covered porches to be as expensive as they are. But when you consider roof lines, roofing is expensive. Very, very, very expensive. It's a lot of square footage, not to mention opening up your existing roof, tying a carrier beam in, all the decking that you have to do. There's a lot of work. So this covered porch, because it's attached to your home, is almost always, in every city that I know of, going to require a permit. Because it's an extension to your home, one, the government's gonna want its money, and two, they're gonna wanna make sure that they increase your property taxes to account for the fact that your home is now worth more money. And this whole permitting process applies to 3-season and 4-season rooms that I'll get into here in a little bit. The pricing on a covered porch is going to vary widely. You can get them for as little as $15,000 if you get an aluminum aluminum skin foam panel roof with aluminum extrusion exteriors. We've built those before, all the way up to 40 to even 50,000 if you get like rough cedar underdecking, which is the look underneath the roof. But most of these, I would say from my experience, are somewhere between the $30,000 to $40,000 range if you do it with a reputable contractor who is honest about his prices and will be in business over the next 5 to 10 years. Screen room or screen porch is essentially the covered porch, so you can go back and look at everything I talked about. Comes a roof line, and I don't have to talk about it again, except now with screens on the exterior. Those screens can either be motorized or manual drop shades that come down, or fixed panel screens, both of which can work. Typically, if your goal is a screen room, you're gonna get fixed panels. The big pros around a screen porch is the fact that you're gonna be able to get all the bugs out of the space. That's a big win. And you're still gonna allow a lot of airflow through the area. So it's gonna be really pleasant on those particularly nice days. The last pro is it's just frankly more affordable than a 3-season or 4-season sunroom. The cons are it's not really built for weather. And when I say that, I mean like when there's dust outside, that dust ends up inside that room. When it's raining, that rain still gets inside that room. And obviously when it's cold or too hot, it still is cold or too hot in that room. So it is part of the outside. If you're doing covered porch, it's also gonna take a long time to build. For a covered porch, I would budget somewhere around a month and a half to actually get the whole structure from start to throwing all the trash, to punch lists, to finished. Pricing on a screen porch is basically the covered porch I talked about before. So usually somewhere around $30,000 to $35,000. You can get them, again, depending on size, for less, with screen walls added. So you're gonna add, anywhere between $5,000 to $10,000, depending on who you're having do it and what they're building it with. The next category is our product, aluminum louvered pergolas, and that is basically a roof that opens and closes. So this gives you that same sort of shade that you're looking for in a normal covered porch, but it gives you the ability to open it back up to make it feel like an actual pergola where you have more of that light coming in. The pros are gonna be the fact that, again, like I said, you get the light still in the house. You're usually gonna be building it with solid commercial grade aluminum. If you've watched any of our other videos, then you're gonna buy something like that. So it's gonna last a long time, longer than most of the wood. Because it can close, it also will allow all the water to hit those louvers, run off to the gutters, and drain out through the posts. So it allows you to have that enclosed space, much like a covered porch, where yes, water can still come in from the sides, but it still gives you that coverage over above you from rain, snow, and sun. It's gonna require almost no maintenance, cleaning, general cleaning, but you're not gonna have to stain it or paint it like you do on wood variants. And it's still gonna add value to the home. How much value, I don't know, because we haven't had this product class exist in the US market for long enough. I could sell you an amount, but I'd prefer not to lie up front. Timing for an aluminum louvered pergola is frankly fantastic. It's designed to be like that. With our product, for example, if you're handy, it probably could take you a day to build our pergola. It's more stripped down and more minimalist, and so it makes it a much easier and quicker installation. And the other huge benefit is the fact that it just looks sleek. Like, it just looks nice, it looks rich. So the cons on this category, there are cons, I won't just sell you on pros, is the fact that it is going to be more expensive per lineal foot sometimes than a lot of alternatives, especially compared to a traditional pergola. And it may require some sort of professional installation depending on what you're building. If you buy one of ours and it's freestanding, it's designed to be as simple as possible for someone who's barely touched tools before in their life. But if you're getting it attached to your house, you're gonna have to work through a professional contractor to make sure it meets your building codes in the area and that it's done properly. Pricing for this entire category for commercial grade, which is what I would highly recommend, whether you buy ours or someone else's, is gonna be somewhere between, $8,000 to $40,000. On the 8,000, it's gonna be much smaller, obviously. So as you get into the normal size variants, it's gonna be usually somewhere between 13,000 to, again, closer to 30 to 40,000. If you're getting it fully installed with a custom built one from one of our competitors, it'll be usually about twice our price. But if you're buying one from us and then getting someone to build it for you, you're gonna be somewhere in that, $12, $14 to $17,000 range. There are also other variants of aluminum pergolas that exist out there that are not quite that commercial grade. Now, I don't like to slander our competitors. Just keep in mind that you are going to want to buy something that's going to last for a long period of time, unless it's looking for some sort of quick fix, in which case, again, it's like an umbrella. You may want something for a few years, and you know you're going to move in 2 years. You may not want to buy one of our $17,000 pergolas if you're only going to live there for the next 2 years. All right, so 3-season rooms is your next category. A 3-season room is either going to be like the covered porch I talked about before, made out of wood, except instead of screen walls, it's going to be glass walls with some sort of 3-season glass. A 3-season glass is what it sounds like. It's good for spring, fall, summer. Technically, the other variant of 3-season room would be something like a solarium. If you remember the Wendy's that had that glass structure attached to the side, these were popular for a period of time. I would highly recommend you do not buy this product. It usually retains a lot of heat and it gets very cold. So we actually replaced a solarium on a customer's home that was 2 stories tall and open to the entire house. Their energy bill was absurd. Buying from us a 2-story sunroom that was like $80,000 paid for itself in energy bills over 5 years. They also have seal failure issues. They're a nightmare. Outside of that, normal 3-season rooms work all the time. Highly recommend you get one with a lot of windows that can open as much as possible. So the largest window opening you can, so you can get as much breeze in as you can. The big pros around this is gonna be more useful than a screen room. It's gonna be more versatile for whatever you wanna use the space for. And it's gonna keep out that weather. It's gonna keep out the rain now. It's gonna keep out the snow. And if you wanna put a space heater in there, you might be able to actually be in that space in somewhat colder environments. My recommendation on this, before I get to the cons, get one that's engineered like a 4 Seasons room at the start. Because if you ever change your mind, you're not gonna rip the concrete out and redo it. So get one with a vapor barrier in the concrete so that no water is coming through that concrete, and ideally insulated as well. If you've ever stood on a concrete floor in the winter, it is super cold on your feet. Well, that coldness translates both through the ground and into your feet and also onto the windows, which then gather like condensation on the interior of your glass. So you'll be wiping water off inside your room when it gets cold. So definitely engineer it like a 4 Seasons room, but you can still save money on 3-season glass. Okay, so for the cons, it's not gonna be usable usually in year-round climates, especially ones that experience colder winters. It's just not designed for that sort of environment, so you have to know that going into it. It's also gonna be more expensive than a screen room because instead of screens, you're buying glass instead. For 3-season room, I would budget somewhere around, I would say 2 months roughly to build it, from start to finish, depending on what they're doing, and you have to permit before that. So you might be 3 months from start of permit to finished permit if it's a quick permit, or 4 months if it's start to permit, finish permit, and then 2 months of building. So it just takes time. That's something you need to know. So pricing for a 3-season room is gonna be like the covered porch I talked about before. So we're using that as a jumping off point, plus now glass. So you're definitely gonna add $10,000 to $15,000 for the glass, again, depending on how big the space is. So be thinking somewhere around that $40,000 to $60,000 mark, depending on square footage and what type of glass you get and what sort of concrete work has to be done. You know, sky's kind of the limit, frankly, on these rooms. Last category here is 4-season rooms. Now, 4-season rooms are 3-season rooms with better glass, and also an HVAC or a climate conditioned unit somehow involved. So imagine that 3-season room, except instead of single pane glass that you were getting before, you're getting double pane glass. We can go through a whole video talking about windows and different panes and what that means, or triple pane glass. Frankly, double pane is fine. You don't probably need triple pane for the small benefit it will give you. So the pros, it's usable in all seasons. You can use it in the winter, you can use it in the summer, you can use it year round. You're also gonna have a space that's more of a natural extension of the home. So you're basically like adding square footage to your actual house. It is a house addition, but with glass instead of with traditional walls. It sometimes can also integrate into your heating and cooling system you have in your house. So that may be part that's also built in. But that kind of also leads us into our cons. The first con on a sunroom, a 4-season sunroom, is the fact that this room is going to be the worst performing energy room in your entire home. Because of the glass, it doesn't matter. The sun will heat up the room, so in the summer, it will always be the hottest room in the house. In the winter, it will always be the coldest room in the house. That's just something you need to know to start with. Also, you're probably gonna need to buy a separate heating and cooling unit in there, whether it's the built-in HVAC systems that are on the wall with the little fan on the back, or it's something in the top like a split system, or you somehow extend the heating and cooling unit in your own home. Usually most homes have a furnace and an AC unit that's designed for the square footage of their current home. So you'd have to do the math to see if it can actually handle the extension into something like a sunroom, especially given the fact that it is gonna be so ill-performing compared to everything else. A split system usually works better because it can regulate its own temperature and the house can stay its own temperature, and you never have to worry about the two getting too drastically different than one another. Other con on a 4-season room is the fact that it's going to be expensive. A 4-season room is now a 3-season room with better glass, so you might as well start your budgeting at $40,000 minimum. For 4-season here, the timing is gonna be basically the same as 3-season room. It's gonna require the same amount of permitting, except now that's a 4-season room, you typically are gonna require an energy rating of the room also in most jurisdictions these days. That's part of the United States now. So you need to be able to say that this room will perform this well, generally, or at least the windows will perform this well in order to get approved by your city. Again, for a 4-season room, I would budget 2 months to get through the permitting process to more, depending on how quick you are getting back with your contractor or how good they are at elevation drawings, and then 2 months to build the project from broken ground to finished. Pricing for a 4-season room is gonna be a 3-season room, but more expensive. So I would start minimum usually around that $40,000 range, unless you have finished floor already there or a covered porch already there and you're just throwing glass in. It's gonna start really expensive. It's just nature of the beast. You're doing a house addition. It costs a lot of money. And that's gonna go all the way up to kind of sky's the limit. We've sold sunrooms where we've installed a giant 2-story sunroom that was, that project was about $80,000. We've done another sunroom, which was basically a house addition. It was so big that was around $100,000. So you can make it as big as you want, but most people are somewhere around the $50,000 to $60,000 range, I would say. All right, so that's all the shade options you have here in 2025. I know this was a long video, so thanks for sticking with it. If you guys have any questions about different shade options that I didn't cover or specifics around each of these shade options that I might have missed, let us know in the comments below. If you're interested in louvered pergolas, like I mentioned before, you can check out our website, theluxurypergola.com. That'll be in the description down below, and I'll see you in the next one. See ya.
Bye.
Peace.